welcome back to Faith Unraveled. We're right in the middle of our deconstruction series, and today we're super excited to talk about whether or not it's possible to experience joy outside of the church. And our starting point for today's episode is a quote from Rusty Nelson.
Russell M. Nelson, come on.
Sorry. Our starting point is a quote from Russell Nelson, and it goes something like this. The unrighteous may experience any number of emotions and sensations, but they will never experience joy. Now, from my standard, I am living a righteous life. I feel like I may as well have followed Jesus right out of the church, right? But according to Russell Nelson, as the quote continues, joy is a gift for the faithful. So righteous on his terms means like you're doing everything the way that the church has prescribed. So when you're leaving the church, I think that it would be a mistake to overlook how much these ideas can influence our brain and our programming. And there's so much to be said for our mindset and what we create based on what's programmed in there. And so I think this is really important to unpack. We've both experienced that joy is abundant outside of the church, but it took a little while to get there. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we've had to unpack to get to that point.
So you have also taken your name off the records of the church. So there's no way that you can have the Holy Ghost with you and experience true joy. At least that's what the church believes.
This is a really great point. Yeah, because I'm not only unrighteous based on the church's definition, but I actually surrendered my gift of the Holy Ghost, so to speak, because I took my name off of the records. And my life is more beautiful and more joyful than it's ever been. So how can that be? So we're going to talk about that today.
And hopefully we can cover some of the myths that the church talk about with people who leave the church and how they're not happy, how they lose their countenance.
Yeah.
And we can talk about how we see it very differently nowadays.
Yeah. So deprogramming is actually the first thing that I have on my list. I feel like mindset is such a big component. And one of the cruelest things done from members of the church is to point and scoff at how miserable people are when they leave, completely overlooking the fact that people have been programmed that way. We're taught that we can't thrive outside the church. We're taught that all of our blessings come as a result of being faithful members of the church. And what we really need to do, in my mind, is start with the deprogramming. Start with recognizing that it's okay to dethrone people who have planted these ideas in your mind, people who held a very high position in your mind, a position of authority, that have told you things about yourself that are not true.
So one of the stories that we've been taught since we were little kids was related to the holding to the rod, Lehi's stream. Like you hold to the rod and you continue holding to the rod, you make it to a tree of eternal life where you can have the fruit there. But there's what is outside of the tree.
Yeah, people who leave the rod are confused.
Going into a mist of darkness.
They're going into a mist of darkness. So obviously they're totally confused.
Yeah.
They've been deceived by Satan.
Yeah.
Then they end up just these gluttonous,
at the great and spacious building,
gluttonous,
right?
rude people.
Who's laughing at everybody who's eaten from the tree of life. And honestly, once you get outside of Mormonism, you're not really laughing at anybody. What you're doing normally is just living a more authentic life.
I think that this is where the component of the ex-Mormon content that makes you laugh if you've left the church, but for people in the church, it's like extremely offensive. And I will say that kind of social media content is really helpful for the deprogramming process. So I will use the example of the TK smoothies. I think it was actually Joseph Fielding Smith who said that basically that bodies would not be the same in the telestial kingdom as they would be in the celestial kingdom. And
Barbie dolls.
Right. And that's because in the celestial kingdom, you're going to have the genitalia that are required for reproducing, which won't be needed in the telestial kingdom. So there's this joke about the TK smoothies. Now, to someone who's an active member of the church, they would find that just completely offensive, mostly because most active members of the church don't actually believe that. But the reason that it's important to see it and to laugh at it, in my mind, is because it's a critical component to this deprogramming process. Talking about a TK smoothie sounds absolutely ridiculous. So if you can see that a TK smoothie is ridiculous and that came from that same person of authority, then maybe you can go the next step and say, oh, maybe this bit about me not being righteous, I'm not going to be able to see my family in the eternities. Maybe that was bullshit too. Maybe the idea that I can't live a joyful life is bullshit too. If you can see how preposterous some of the claims were, then you can look at the other things and say, oh, maybe I'm not unworthy because I'm gender fluid. Maybe I'm not unworthy because I'm attracted to people of the same gender.
Or maybe I'm not unworthy when I would just want to drink some alcohol, or I'm not unworthy if I want to go clubbing and dancing or listening to music that might have been inappropriate that when you were in the church.
I would go as far as to say that the things that have been said about people who leave the church are lies. And it started all the way back in Brigham Young's time when Emma Smith stayed back and did not travel with the saints to Utah. Ever since the beginning of the church, there's all these narratives about apostates. And if you were a believing active member of the church, then there's a good chance that at some point you've believed these stories, which becomes really problematic when you deconstruct and you become the apostate, because now there's all these narratives that you have running in your head about people who leave the church. They're not prosperous, lazy, a decommissioned temple, and what they have is like a virulent virus. They are rebellious. There's so many narratives about this. I think Brad Wilcox also talked about it being like drama. Do you want all the drama? And it's just so belittling, because this process, we're trying to reclaim our identity. We're trying to reclaim our dignity in some cases. When we deconstruct and we believe all of these things, that takes a healing process to become whole again.
So going back to what you were saying earlier on in one of our series, you talked about fear, shame, and guilt, right? Church uses fear as you leave the church, right? If you're going to leave the church, they use all these tropes to get you to feel fear about leaving the church.
Right.
And a lot of us felt that same thing. As we started stepping out and jumping down the rabbit hole, we were scared. There were times where we were fearful of the unknown. Now, looking back on it, there was nothing to fear, but that's how we felt at the time.
I felt even fearful about taking off my garments.
Yeah.
Because being given my garment, I really took that seriously, that this will be a protection to you against the powers of the adversary all the days of my life. And so just even taking those off, I was afraid to not pay tithing. I never worried about burning. I know a lot of people call like tithing their fire insurance, but I just always thought of it as like the reason that we are blessed is because we give
10%.
to the, yeah. And so I just thought, what's going to happen when that stops? I'll tell you what happens when you stop paying 10% tithing. You get a 10% raise.
Exactly. You do. You get a 10% raise.
Yeah. So that's what happens. So just going through some kind of personal process where you can disarm those messages, recognizing that we're going to have to dethrone these guys who have planted these messages in our head. They don't have power over us. These prophets who we loved so much, and I believed what they said, and it didn't cross my mind that the messages are not all true. Some of it is just coming from their own ego, their own programs that they,
They've been taught this since they were a little kid themselves. So they were
Right.
indoctrinated just like we were. We were indoctrinated with these messages since primary. Since we were in Sunbeams as a 4-year-old, Jesus wants me for a sunbeam. I hope they called me on a mission. We have been taught these messages since we were a little kid.
18 months old is actually when nursery starts.
18 months.
Sunbeams is 3.
Yeah.
So from 18 months old, you're singing these songs. And even you mentioned, if you chance to meet a frown, do not let it stay. Quickly turn it upside down and smile that frown away. Even when you think about it like that, like you're teaching children from a very young age to have this happy at all cost. And that's the thing that I would like to get into next. So we talked about the deprogramming. Tell us in the notes, tell us in the comments, what have you done to disarm some of this stuff in your mind? Yeah. Is it reading back through church history? Is it talking about it with someone? Is it being in a chat group or a Marco Polo or a Facebook group where you see how preposterous these claims are? I
know a lot of members feel very hurt by people showing like the temple garments, but that's another way that ex-Mormons like give up that power. Like they don't want that power.
Disable this stuff.
Exactly. And they do it so that it doesn't have control over them.
Yes.
And however, like the members think that we're making fun of something sacred, but it's to get rid of it as a anchor or something that had control over them for so long.
Absolutely. Every circumstance is so individual. And thinking about how harmful these messages are, thinking about women who are in abusive relationships and they had to bow their head in covenant to obey the law of their husband. And a lot of these messages that the church teaches are harmful to a lot of families. I would venture to say that there's not a single family that hasn't been in some way harmed by the teachings of the church, because every family has at least one wayward person. Each family has someone who's not cisgender straight. Every family has someone. And so we're all impacted by this. And so the making fun of, say, the temple ordinances, I see where it holds a really important place. It's a way for us to look at it and laugh at it. And that is a healing process, laughing at things that used to hold you captive.
Yeah. And I know a lot of members will struggle with us saying that it held us captive, right? They will feel like we're disrespecting their religion, but that's how we see it. And we hold space for ourselves to deconstruct that. And so if you don't like it, scroll on, but that's what you're going to continue to see as part of this process.
Exactly. If it weren't for the harmful messages that are written about people who leave the church, the temple ceremonies would never be attacked. The reason that those temple ceremonies have been attacked by social media creators is because they have harmful messages, they have harmed people, and this is a way for people to disarm that programming and disable that programming. To laugh at something is extremely healing. There's almost nothing quicker to heal than laughter. If you're able to actually make fun of it, if you're actually able to like laugh at it. And I see where there's a place for it. Even though I don't make that kind of content on my platform, I see a place for it, a very important place for it.
Yeah. And what drives that harm is the church's belief of absolute truth. They believe that they are the only true church living on this earth. And as you deconstruct and figure out, like most of the ex-Mormons believe that it was all an illusion, that the church history was all made up by Joseph Smith, partially because of the deep dive that we've done, that absolute truth goes away. And so everything on top of that absolute truth, like all the harm, like you could accept the harm if it was directly from God, because you're like, okay, God is directing us in this direction and I will follow it. Even though I don't agree with it or I understand it, I will follow it. But once you figure out that that truth is not real, then everything that you did on that truth that might have been harmful or was harmful,
now it stands out.
Now it stands out and becomes a big problem. And now you have to work that you harmed other people. And on top of that, then you have to figure out like all the modalities that kind of worked around that truth and what your thoughts were around that truth. You have to work through that in your brain. And some of that working through is bringing this forward.
Yeah. And so whether you're in a social media community where people post things and they just post like how ridiculous some of these statements are, because I think the idea for me is if you're able to see how ridiculous the idea of a TK smoothie is, then maybe you can also agree with the fact that not allowing children of LGBTQ people to be baptized is also ridiculous, or suggesting that your gay children shouldn't be allowed to bring their partners home for the holidays is a ridiculous idea.
And it goes back to that binary mindset. Like it's all or nothing, either true or not true.
Yeah.
And if it's not true, then you're on Satan's side of the house. There's no like spectrum in between that binary mindset, that view of absolute truth. You're now in that great and spacious building. And so you're treated like you're in that great and spacious building. And they think, oh, there's no way, because they're like Satan, there's no way they can be happy.
And actually, this is the next thing on my list of things that we brainstorm is the binary thinking. The church's presentation is that it's this or that, shifting from a worldview of you have to choose either this or that to instead thinking about life as this and that. Because in truth, polarities are everywhere around us. Just take the faith crisis experience, for example. You're going to have rage. You're also going to have moments of gratitude. You're going to have beauty. You're going to have pain. There's going to be every point of emotion during this faith deconstruction process. And what the church teaches us is that we have to choose one, right? You have to choose true or false, righteous or wicked. And in reality, life is really about embracing polarities, both side of it. I heard someone the other day talk about her faith deconstruction, and she talked about stepping into this space of sacred rage. And it's this kind of rage that makes people want to step into advocacy and push for change and get on social media and start talking about it. And like that rage that she's talking about is the kind of rage that's going to propel you forward. And I had never heard those two words used together, sacred rage. And when I use the word sacred, I mean that it's very important. So I thought that was really interesting because I find that gratitude is one of the most compelling emotions. If we can look back on our experience in the church and say, my life is partly what it is because I had the church, those are beautiful feelings of gratitude, but we don't have to choose that at the rejection of the other. We can have both. Like you're going to have to embrace all these different polarities. They all exist together. It's a challenge to our cognition because we think more quickly and more easily from a binary mindset where you just have to choose this or that. Now we're forced to embrace lots of different critical, sometimes opposing components.
I think you have to live in a more nuanced space, or I guess there's probably people that leave that still are binary in thought process, but I have found myself in more peaceful situations when I can accept that gray or that nuance.
They both exist at the same time.
Exactly. And it's okay. It's okay not to be happy, right? You don't have to be happy all the time. It's okay to embrace that emotion, let it flow through you. This experience of stepping away from the church, losing that binary mindset might be hard for some people, but I've found more peace, that mindset. And I think I shared how I see the world very different now as far as values, right and wrong. Where I see wrong nowadays is just harm. Like it's not like drinking alcohol, feeling an emotion, being not happy. That's not a bad thing. That's okay. It's okay to feel the emotion. It's okay to have anxiety and work through that anxiety. It's not something that I need to hold under and never like work through it. So I see things very different now.
One of the biggest experiences that I had in the first couple of years of my deconstruction was that I did a healing psychedelic journey using psilocybin. And the big breakthrough that I had with that experience was that I felt this intense love for my family. And it was in particular my 3 children. This feeling of such intense love. It was almost like I felt like the emotion of love was just breathed into me. And it was so overwhelming that I could barely breathe. And in this moment, I couldn't differentiate if what I was feeling was fear or if it was love. It was like, what is this? Like the same moment I'm feeling how intensely I love my children. I remembered back through their births, holding them as infants. I felt this intense fear of losing them. And that is when I realized that in the same vein of loving someone, we fear losing them. They exist together. And a lot of people would say like fear and love are the opposites. They actually exist together. When you say, I love you, it is the same as saying, I fear losing you. It was an important lesson for me because I have been taught that everything in this world is this or that. And don't be a fence sitter. What this experience taught me is that 2 opposing things can exist not only simultaneously, they can exist in the same vein. So I think natural feelings of gratitude do come up for most people, but there's also a space for anger. There's also a space for loss and grief and sadness. I'm thinking about just people that I've connected with through TikTok that went through years of conversion therapy, just like trying to not be gay. And so when I think about comparing my life as a cis het white woman to people that went through the experience of trying to spend their first 10 years of their adulthood, or in some cases 20 years, some people live their entire lives that way. It really breaks my heart. So I think finding gratitude in this process, it's going to be pretty easy for some of us. It's going to be a lot easier than it is for others. But all of the emotions are valid, from the sacred rage to the gratitude,
to the sadness, to the happiness.
Yes.
So you're going to feel all the emotions, this process. And it's not like you don't have joy when you're feeling it. Like,
right.
I do think that members look at some of the people and they're like, oh, they were so happy in the church. Oh, now they're outside the church and they're feeling all these emotions. And so
right.
that must
the drama.
be, yeah, they're bringing drama into it. No, they're really experiencing life.
Yes.
To the fullest. Like they're feeling the emotion of life, and they're dealing with life and not trying to look to the celestial kingdom. They're living in the now. In the church, you always have this internal perspective. You're always looking for the celestial kingdom. You're always looking for making it to the next life. And when you're always looking for the future, you lose what's in the present. And what I have gained as I have left the church is this appreciation for every single moment. This is the only moment right now, is the only moment I'll have for this. And once this passes, I won't be able to come back to this moment. And so you look at that with your kids, you're like, this is my only time I have with my kids. And so my only time I have with my daughter, that's 24. My only time I have with my son, that's 21. The only moment I have with my son, that's 14. And I need to make it the best possible moment every time with them. And so now I don't look to the future and look, hey, we'll have this great relationship in the future. No, I want to make this great relationship now. And so living in the presence has probably been the best gift of deconstruction. The other gift of deconstruction is authenticity, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're in the church, you are constructing yourself to whatever that your church wants you to be. Whether that's, so in the temple, you've been taught to be obedient, sacrifice, law of chastity, and law of consecration. So you're giving everything to the church. You're giving your time, your money, your talents to the church. You rarely self-indulge.
Yeah.
Now you're able to say, hey, I'm doing this because I want to do this. I'm doing this not because someone's telling me to do this, because I truly love doing what I'm doing. And whether that's like, right now, I really enjoy music. I enjoy dancing. I enjoy like hanging out with my partner. I enjoy like the moments I spend with my family. And I can live authentic in them. They can be who they want to be, and I'll still love them for who they are. They don't have to be obedient in the church. They don't have to be this temple-going person. They can be whoever they want to be, and I still accept them for who they are. And we can still be together and talk together and love one another in this space of who they want to be. Where in the church, you can't be that. You have to be the way the church wants you to be. And if you're not that person, normally it comes with like judgment or shame or guilt. Right?
Exactly. You just get to decide what your formula is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. And as we've talked about before, you may end up doing a lot of the same things you did in the church. Maybe you decide that living a sober lifestyle is what works best for you. Maybe you decide that you don't really want to show your midriff or your shoulders. And so you wear more conservative clothes, and that's great too. But the point is,
it's your choice.
It's your choice. Yeah. And living a life with your own choices is beautiful. The other thought I had that has contributed a lot to my joy is being able to read things from other people and other sources, and to not take it so seriously, because for one thing, you view everything now as just concepts. Everything in life is really just concepts. There's no capital T truth usually for most people when they deconstruct.
Because you don't know what the capital T truth is.
Yeah. Science is evolving. Medicine is evolving. Everything are just moving ideas. And so being able to read a book and take some really great concepts from it, but not view it as like the capital T truth because it's a binary line. Everything's either true or not true. You can take it or leave it. And you can also change your mind. There's nothing more beautiful than the 4 words, I changed my mind. I did not make that up. I heard someone say it. Tell me if you know who it was in the comments. But the 4 most beautiful words, I changed my mind. And this is a beautiful aspect of life, being able to navigate knowing that there's room to change your mind. Do you know how wonderful it is to raise kids in an environment where it's okay for them to make mistakes? It's okay for them to have ideas that are different than yours. We're no longer indoctrinating our children. We are engaging them in the exploration that is life. Life is about discovery. When we raise our kids in the confines of this is what truth is, and I'm going to tell you what it is, how much more smart and empathic and emotionally intelligent are they going to be to navigate a life based on discovery, exploration, and freedom?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like our kids now can go to YouTube, simulation theory, learn about aliens, learn about dinosaurs, right? Because
evolution, right?
Evolution. They can learn about all these different theories and they can absorb it and they can accept it or not accept it, but then they can live more authentically themselves. When they're living more authentically themselves and you're being authentic, then the relationship becomes an authentic relationship.
And family conversations are so much more interesting, right?
We're not talking about Nephi or Alma.
I think it's important too that we don't indoctrinate our kids with anything. There are some basic ideals that are based on my values that I hope that my kids land in those same places, but I'm allowing them to explore. If you learn as a parent how to ask the right questions, your kids are going to go where they need to go.
Yeah.
If you learn to ask the right questions.
Maybe one of these days we can have on this podcast our kids and they can share where they're at. But my daughter made the comment, it was when we were in Vegas. So this last December, we're Odessa fans, right? I'm an Odessa fan, and Odessa was playing in Resort World in Vegas at a club. And so we invited our daughter to go with us. We took the 2 boys, they went off to the Sphere while we went to the club. And what was so fun about that, Madeline made a comment like, Dad, I really love the version of you after the faith crisis. And that made me feel really good, right? The version of me I thought was really connected with my daughter prior to the faith crisis, but I look at it now and we couldn't get on a level to where I accepted her for who she was. Now we're accepting one another for who we are and how we live life. And we just have so much more fun and enjoyment now because we're accepting one another for who we are.
Another thing that I wanted to talk about, at the risk of sounding like I've got a superiority complex because I've deconstructed, I feel for me personally that deconstructing allowed my emotional intelligence to increase because you're able to see things through multiple lenses. And I will say, I do think that there are members of the church that are still in the box, as we say, that have actually gone out and have looked through the other lens and decided to go back into the box for other reasons.
And I would say there's people probably in the church. And this could be very offensive. What we're talking about could be very offensive to them because then they're like, hey, I have a fun time. I enjoy life. What are you talking about? That's all, you're all BS.
But this is just our life experience.
Exactly. This is how we view it. But I'm sure there's people that have a similar view as us inside the church. I'm no longer thinking that everybody's just one way of thinking inside the church. Right?
Yeah. And that's where really the binary thinking can really get you into trouble, because if you don't deconstruct that, then that's exactly what you're going to come to. Like people inside the church, they're just closed-minded. They're not emotionally intelligent. They're not Of course, there's all kinds of wonderful people inside the church that have all those great qualities. And so hopefully you get to deconstruct to the point that you can see all of that and just see.
Hold space for it, right?
Yeah.
You can hold space for those people that are still inside the church.
The last thing that I wanted to talk about, a huge part of my joy in leaving the church is getting to choose my people. Everyone that is in my sacred circle is someone that I have chosen to be there.
So why don't you describe the difference between what it was like in the church versus outside the church?
I don't think I put this together until later, but the relationships that we have inside the church, a lot of them are obligatory. There's this experience being in the church, and I didn't realize how universal it was until I started deconstructing and talking to other people, that if someone that you love moves to the other side of town, you're probably not going to see them again.
That's true.
You're probably not going to talk to them much
When
again.
the ward split, you don't really talk to anybody else.
Right. Yeah. You have a ward split and then redivide of 10 years down the road. I didn't see them for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I love them being in the same ward. But the way that this church organization is set up is that you have assignments. Your friendships are basically on assignment. And if you're doing everything that the church prescribes, then you don't have a lot of time outside of that for your own relationships.
That's true.
And so friendships are non-existent. And I don't want to say non-existent.
A lot of people will say they have friends in the church.
A lot of people will. My personal experience is that a lot of times when I would go to hang out with people, I would feel anxiety. I would feel like I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I just would feel a lot of anxiety, and I would feel obligation to get together with people.
Is it because you're not connecting on your own terms? You're connecting based upon what the church has given to you?
Absolutely. So I had all these people in my circle that were like, I'm sure great people, but I'm spending all this time on people that I barely know, people we don't have that much in common with. Again, the complexities. I'm grateful for the things that I learned from people. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to go down for years at a time, picking up food for people at the Bishop Storehouse that needed help with that. It was a great experience. It was also an overwhelming experience. Like the same can be true at the same time, you know, and how much of your time and your precious, most precious resource of time is spent based on an assignment. Yeah. And those weren't even lasting relationships. I'd like to say that they were, but I'm being honest. Like a lot of them were relationships that dissolved after that visiting teaching assignment was changed.
Or when you moved wards.
Yeah.
Or when you moved to a different calling within that ward, right?
Absolutely. So with visiting teaching, you may have 5 different assignments that are people that need meals on a regular basis. They need deep conversations on a regular basis. They need support for their kids, need rides to school. They need food from the Bishop Storehouse. And this is the functionality of the church, is that we care for each other. There's a ministry there. I'm not saying that's not beautiful. That's beautiful. But there is also a beauty on the other side of that, where you get to, for once in your lifetime, choose the people that are in your sacred circle. And that's why I call it a sacred circle, because it's the one that you have chosen. Everyone that's there is there because you have mutually chosen to share that sacred space together. And I don't have a lot, but the people that are there, I love hanging out with them. I love getting together. Like people that we text, the people that we hold dear, whether it's like Marco Polo or text, or you have different kinds of circles. Even like my TikTok community is a circle. There's things, even though there's 70,000 people there, it's a different kind of connection, but we've chosen it. We've mutually chosen to be there in that space together. We've all picked it. And it feels very different than having a friend assigned to you.
Yeah, the other thing that I think the church does is keeps you so busy where it's very difficult to have a strong friendship.
Absolutely.
Because, and I think we shared this in the past, you're busy all Sunday, you're with your family. I feel sorry for some that are in like major leadership callings, like bishop, stake president.
Yes.
Where they're losing a lot of time with their own family because they've decided, like in the temple it talks about sacrifice. They see this as one of their temple covenants is sacrificing their own time is more worth than the time that they have with their families.
John had a panel of bishops on, and one of them said that. He said, if there are things on your mind that are not adding up, you need to look into it, because there are decisions that you're making right now that you would not otherwise make, except that you think the gospel's true.
Yeah.
I'm probably botching it, but that's a huge statement coming from a bishop.
Yeah, it's all encompassing, and you can't get that time back too. Once it's gone, that time is not going to come back. They think it might come back in the celestial kingdom or in the eternal perspective, but that's all, to me, that's all an illusion.
Right.
And so they've lost now that time, whether it's like your 5th grade graduation or going into 6th grade where, I have a calling on top of that and I can't attend it, but you've lost that. And there was times I would say when I was in the church and did certain things that I lost my Sundays with my kids. And instead of spending those precious times with my son, I
hiking or making dinner or.
Yeah, exactly. Now on Sundays, and Sundays have become a family day for us. We don't go to church that day. We go to the beach. We go hiking up the mountain behind our house. We go driving along the coast. We do a lot more together as a family than we did when we were in the church.
And family relationships are so much more beautiful when we don't have the parameters of obedience to measure.
Yeah. How good you are.
How good you are. Yeah. It's like crazy to think about now. So the sacred circle of people. What I will say.
Well, can I add one thing? It is harder to make friends outside of the church.
That's also where I was going next.
Where are you going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is really huge. Yeah. So I have a friend, one of my besties, who's been venturing out, like newly divorced. And so she is just breaking into this experience for the first time. A couple of resources that she's used, the Bumble BFF. She's, I just need to have friends right now. Dating that sounds fun and exciting, but like having friends is like a huge part of deconstruction. And like for so many people coming out of the church, you're just like, I've never really had friends before.
Well, it's because you always have that ward, you have that visiting teacher. And for the kids, they have this youth program, which it coddles them to where they don't have to necessarily learn how to make friends. They're part of a friend group, which then becomes their friend.
Yeah, that is so true. So I will give a shout to Bumble BFF because I know that has worked for my friend and like getting some I recently heard about Marriage on a Tightrope has a number of Marco Polo groups of all different kinds of people. And I just spoke to someone who is in a few of those, and his active wife has been in them as well, because Marriage on a Tightrope is a platform for mixed faith marriages. Katie and Alan Mount. There are apparently like a whole bunch of different kinds of groups within that. So a hiking group, who knows what else, introvert group, I think he said. So anyway, so I just thought, wow, that's amazing. So that's another place, Facebook groups. But the other thing is, if you just start to dive into hobby, like I know a lot of post-Mormon men that are into pickleball. This is like a really big thing. I don't know if it's just Southern California. We'll know because one of them is in Oregon. So there's people that get together to play pickleball. I guess there's like a pickleball revolution happening right now. Anyway, so this is a way that people are meeting each other. If you're into art, take an art class. If you're into dancing, go take some dance classes. Like we're getting ready to go sign up for salsa. We've recruited a couple friends to come salsa dancing with us.
Salsa and bachata.
They're very good sports because I don't think they're really
I think we've conned them into it a bit.
Yeah. But I've had friends call me too. And they're like, hey, do you know anything about Reiki? I'm like, I don't know anything about Reiki, but sounds super interesting. Like you can try things without being like, is this against my beliefs? Am I able to do this? I've got one friend who's like trying to get me to go to a strip club with her. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about strip clubs, but do you see what I mean? There's just so much to explore, and friendships can exist. You can have a friend that you go do yoga with. You can have a friend that you see at pickleball. Not everybody has to be your best friend. You can just create community outside of it. The difference is that before, everything was centered on the gospel, and that's fine. That's fine. I
For those
loved
who
the
want
gospel
that,
when I
yeah.
was in, but it just a component of my joy now outside of the church is having autonomy over my sacred circle, over the people in my environment.
Yeah.
Going back over what else we've talked about today, having the emotional intelligence to be able to see the world through different people's perspectives, being able to embrace two opposite things at once: love, fear, gratitude, rage. And then the first one that we talked about, which we'll go ahead and close on to, is that we'll go ahead and close on today. Sorry, that was just like, you can't take the Mormon out of the girl.
Okay.
Deprogramming. So big, you guys. We have to know, we have to drive this home that like happiness and joy, it is so achievable outside of the church. And you just have to know that beginning phase of deconstruction, it is going to feel awkward. It is going to feel painful at times. It is going to feel like a lonely road at times for many of us. But there is beauty on the other side. Connecting in environments like this is a great place to start. And do you have anything else you want to say on the close of that?
No, I think, again, when we've stated this many times, is be curious and experiment. Like experimenting, going hiking in a hiking group, experimenting. For me, I had a friend who he pinged us and said, hey, why don't we go see Steve Aoki up in Los Angeles? So me and Alicia went with this couple up to Steve Aoki, and it was the funnest time ever. And since then, we've done a number of different types of events.
Yeah, we didn't just like deconstruct and we're like, okay, we go to concerts and festivals now.
Yeah,
No, we had like amazing friends that introduced this to us. We met at a Thrive Christmas party.
Yeah.
We had an ex-Mormon Christmas party. They drove down with a couple other friends from Orange County, and it was so much fun. And so we've stayed connected with them.
Yep.
So going to some of these big events, like the Thrive events, which are all over. In fact, if you want to start a Thrive group, you can.
Yeah.
I was closely helped organize the one in my area. I haven't been as involved with it now because I've had other things go on, but those are a great place to meet and connect with people. And you can also, like, there's apps too, right? Like the Meetup group, Bumble BFF, lots of places. The only reason I'm still on Facebook is because of the groups. And the only reason that I'm still on Facebook is because of the groups. Love Chelsea Homer's Faith Journey Meetup groups. They're doing like a girls camp. Oh my God. There's so many amazing opportunities to meet people, and you can go feeling like a loner, and you might even be at an event that has a table for introverts, and there's something for everyone, guaranteed. And I know a lot of people that are introverts and they're like, I'm going to this thing. I just need to, and then they end up happy that they went, I think, most of the time.
Yeah. So again, experiment and be curious as part of this process, and just enjoy the moment that you're in.
Yeah. So it is possible for the unrighteous to experience any number of emotions, including joy. Thanks for joining us today, from one unrighteous soul to another. Okay, we'll see you next time.
Like, subscribe.
And subscribe. Thanks, guys.